Hi everyone, welcome to another brand new episode of Women of Community Banking podcast. Today we've got Caroline with us. Hi Caroline, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you.
Firstly, thank you for taking your time out to join us from your crazy schedule. All of us know that, but again, so I think it took me and Pranil more than a month to get this 30 minutes on your calendar. It's I know it's pretty difficult, but again, thank you for accommodating us. We really appreciate it, right?
When
Uh,
you say that, it makes me sound like such a diva, but it's just a busy time.
you need to accept the fact that you are busy, right? You need to accept the fact that you are busy, but still, you have deep concern or deep interest for the movement, right? And hence you want to come up and talk about the movement every single time, and you express interest in sharing your journey. So again, appreciate that. I'll do a quick introduction who Caroline is. I mean, I don't think she is someone who needs an introduction, but still, who Caroline is. Caroline is the CEO of Cornerstone League, one of the famous credit union leagues that I have been following for the past few years. Very aspirational, right? She spent almost 30 years in financial services. She came into credit unions, I think, almost 25 years back, more than a couple of decades. Worked with a credit union, then moved to another CUSO, PS, co-op, right? She spent almost more than 10 years in co-op before
Mhm.
finally joining Cornerstone League, and now she runs Cornerstone League. Her only mission vision is helping credit unions succeed, helping the motto and mission of people helping people make real as much as possible, right? She's an amazing leader in the ecosystem. And again, Caroline, thank you for taking your time out to join us today. In case you have missed adding anything, please feel free to add because I do a horrible job with introductions. I tell this to everyone. In case miss something, please feel free.
I think you nailed it. I think the only other item that I think people might find interesting is that I'm a California transplant living in Texas, and so I've learned to love barbecue and all things sports and even a little country western music. So I am acclimating, I would say.
So now you're a Texan, right? For the lack of better words, you're trying to be a Texan. So let's accept the fact.
I wasn't born here, but I got here as fast as I could.
Like me, I mean, just imagine. I mean, I'm from India. Now I live in New York for the past few years, and I'm trying to be as much as New Yorker as being possible. So it's same.
Almost exactly.
Almost exactly right. Huge cultural change, but it's fun.
Sure. Sure.
Cool. Let's start with the first question right now. Obviously, the work you do is very, varied and diverse because you work with so many states, with so many leagues, with so many credit unions, right? It's not easy being a leader of the league. So, Caroline, what keeps you going?
Well, I love this movement. And you referenced about 3 decades in kind of banking, if you will. And I did work for one of those four-letter words. I did work for a thrift, actually, which is not in the 90s. And I knew that I loved the intellectual properties of working in community banking. However, I didn't realize what was missing until I found credit unions because even though the work was interesting at a thrift, I joined a credit union and I thought, this is what I've been missing. This fills my cup because I knew that we didn't offer, for example, interest-only mortgages that kept people in perpetual debt. We would never, a credit union doesn't do things like that. They help their communities. And so the job gets to be intellectually stimulating, but it also does something for my heart. And I think that that's what keeps me going is that I really do feel like through the extension of the credit unions that I serve, I get to help some communities along the way.
I mean, that's exactly is your, I would say, for the lack of better words, ikigai, right? Ikigai is a Japanese term talking about your inner reason for doing something, right? I think
Oh,
that's
sure.
that's exactly what keeps you going. I understand. Uh, Now, looking at your journey, right? A very diverse one: banking, then getting introduced to what credit unions are, then moving on the other side of working with CUSOs across co-op, then moving to the league, right? I mean, it's been a very different career trajectory than a credit union exec has, right? You multiple things. So, what has been your journey so far, Caroline? If we can understand or learn more about your journey from you itself, it will be amazing.
Well, sure. I mean, doing a job working in retail banking, I think gave me an appreciation for the complexities of it, for even at that time in the early aughts, the regulatory burden, or responsibility, I guess back then is what I would have called it, that, that we had to color within the lines for sure. And so, I learned about that, but moving as I did to co-op, what was then co-op financial services in 2006, then I learned about aggregation. And that's one of the things that credit unions do really well, is that we collaborate with one another. And co-op itself was formed because there were a few dozen California credit unions who wanted to share an ATM network. And that if I can think of an example of collaboration, that's perhaps the best one I can think of, because it's the ability to share resources to be more efficient, to deliver better service to the community. And so I loved the mission of co-op of making technology available for a large number of credit unions so that they experience some scale. And so that
Exactly.
was super satisfying, and I got to do, it's funny, they hired me to do M&A at first, and I'm an MBA, but I had never done mergers and acquisitions. And so they sort of took a leap with me, and I worked on about 11 deals while I was there, in that role. We did more, but I just kind of moved to a different role. And so then I got to understand about attracting good partners and finding solutions that were additive to the movement, that made the movement stronger, better, faster, and that made us able to compete with banks better. And that really lit a fire under me, is okay, we can do something. I can be involved in a company that actually helps us, the entire category, to perform better. So that was really satisfying. Got to do a whole bunch of different roles there. I worked for a great boss, Stan Holland, and we'll come back to that when we talk about female leadership, because Stan really believed in female leaders. And so that allowed me to really stretch. And then from there, I never saw myself moving to a trade association, but you just never know. Sometimes you need to pick up the phone when that recruiter calls and just hear them out. So moving to Cornerstone League in 2017, I've gotten to see yet another lens into the movement, and it's been so satisfying.
I think this gives you a unique perspective of working in a trade organization, because there are a bunch of things you do: for profit, non-profit, helping trade unions succeed. So this is a much broader exposure than just working in any other role specifically. That's interesting. So Caroline, obviously we know what you do, but still I have a two-legged question, right? Which I usually ask. One is, what do you do? And the more interesting is, like, why do you do that? I mean, it might be as crazy as possible, but we want to know more about that.
Sure. Well, I actually oversee three different entities in my paid role. And that means that I run or oversee. I'm at the helm of, because we have a wonderful team. I certainly could not do this by myself. So I oversee an association. So we do advocacy work in 5 different states for 640 credit unions. So we work with state legislatures as well as federal legislators in order to improve the operating environment for credit unions. We try to get laws passed or prevent bad ones from passing in order for them to thrive. So that's one of the entities. We also have a for-profit entity that has a lot of different services to help credit unions. Again, it's that aggregation, right? We do financial audits. We do IT risk assessments. We have an executive search firm that's done placements in 49 states. And so we have a variety of services, some of which we staff ourselves, some of which are just partnerships. And then the third entity is a 501c3, which is a foundation that provides disaster relief and financial wellness support for credit unions throughout our 5-state region and slightly beyond. So really 3 different jobs in one. And then I'm also on, I think, 4 boards right now. I change them
Yeah.
up every once in a while. um, and that's what I do. The why, though, is because I think that there are a lot of problems to be solved. We, for example, on the association side, having worked at a credit union, and I always point to the one guy who used to be in charge of internal audit and regulatory compliance. One guy, $750 million credit union at the time. It's 25 years ago. But still, that one guy could kind of hold it all together. There is no way one guy could hold it all together at that size of a shop anymore because the regulatory burden has gotten so onerous that it's costing credit unions a ton of money. It's preventing them from being able to serve their members better, frankly. And so that is part of the why is we have to make this easier for credit unions so that they thrive and so that they're still the best choice out in the marketplace. Really, everything we do is to that end.
I mean, that's so relatable. Cost of compliance has just skyrocketed, and at times it doesn't make sense, right? At times things need to change. Uh, that's the reason advocacy is important. That's the reason you have such a important role in the puzzle, right? So this is fantastic. And to be very honest, you should know this, right? All of us are grateful that you exist. Without leagues, it's nightmare.
Thank
Nothing
you.
can move. I mean, I'm not making up myself, right? I mean, I don't run a credit union. I mean, I work with credit unions. I have so many credit union friends. I mean, I'm still new to the ecosystem, and people like you have welcomed me with open hands. That Anurag, come and work with us, right? So I've been here for the last what 2.5, 3 years. I know at least 300 credit unions in the last 2.5 years. All of them have that same notion. Without leagues, we can't operate, and this is real. So again, thank you, Caroline, for whatever you do for credit unions. This is highly appreciable. I just want to extend the thank you from the entire community of credit unions, right? So that's real.
That's so kind, and I'm trying to receive that just with grace. But I feel like I am one player. I spent the last few days at a meeting of the American Association of Credit Union Leagues, and so all of the
Yep.
leagues together with America's credit unions, that is the machine that really provides the safety net for credit unions because we're looking across all 50 states, within those legislatures, but also at a federal level, and we've got to have locked arms all the time to be successful. So it is a really well-run partnership. I'm just a piece of it. Thank you, though.
Because Trade Union does is phenomenal, right? So, and Anthony from America's Trade Union, he was a guest in another podcast of mine. He's a very good friend. So, huge amount of respect for them too, and for individual leagues to help move the ball rolling. This is very important. Let's move to the next section of the interview, talking about you as a person, right? Now, since you started working with thrifts long back, credit unions, the journey has not been easy, right? Definitely for a female to get into financial services 30 years back and eventually becoming a CEO of a league. I mean, it's not very frequent, or it's not very obvious. It's like very rare, right? So what are the challenges you have faced, Caroline, for the last few years, and how do you solve challenges? How do you make things work?
Well, I think one thing that has worked for me is being willing to stick my neck out and stretch and try functions that I really had never seen myself doing. The best example that I typically give is when I was at Co-op Financial Services. I did not come with the technology background. I was really a marketing, communications, business development kind of person. And yet, at some point along the way, we had some change within the organization, and I was given responsibility for product development. So suddenly I'm flying to Purchase, New York to meet with MasterCard. And my eyes were as big as they are right now, right? I was a little overwhelmed at the prospect of that because they really knew their stuff. And I know they could tell right away that I really didn't. And yet I'm a diligent student. And so I read and learned everything I could get my hands on so that I would at least ask very good questions. Because I
Yeah.
think for me, that's been a really important lesson along the way. You don't have to know everything. You just have to be really curious and you've got to chase down the answers. And then really good leadership fills in a lot of the gaps if you don't have that technical expertise. So I think I know this is a women of community banking podcast. That is one thing I tell women is don't feel like you have to have every last bit of technical expertise. Hustle and diligence, I guess, which are probably two sides of the same coin, make up for a lot if you're willing to be humble and ask good questions.
I mean, I can't attest more to the fact. I mean, like 3 years back, I was working with the big banks. I mean, I won't name them, but the top banks. I didn't even know what credit unions are. I mean, literally, right? I came with all honesty. Look, I mean, credit union CEOs of size 2.5, 3 billion in assets. I was like, see, I work with this bank. I am an data guy. I don't know what it takes. Explained it to me how a credit union works. I didn't even know about basic functions. People walk me through whatever credit union, whatever little credit union that I know. So it's about, again, if you're being honest, if you can learn, this
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem is there to embrace you, right? There's no one is competing against each other. Everyone is ready to help you, right? That's what makes the most difference. And to your personality, obviously, the example you took about Mastercard, you went, you didn't know, but you learned, right? I mean, look at you now, right? I mean, that's the most important thing, and so proud of what you've achieved. Absolutely, this is great, right? Uh, in terms of advice, right? So this podcast is, being aired across LinkedIn now, across Spotify, Apple Podcasts. So there are a lot of listeners who are aspiring women leaders in credit unions and community banks, right? Uh, so do you have any advice you want to share for aspiring female leaders that you might possibly uh, tell Caroline 25 years back that don't do this, right? Or do this correctly. If you want to share any advice, that will be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what I used to say. I used to say, you need to learn how to play golf, which it sounds kind of quaint now, but I think the point that I used to try to make that probably 10, 15 years ago was be more like a guy. And I say that because I think it's funny now. But I think the better point is that we all need to have really good self-awareness of our own leadership style. And for me, that came because I had a really good executive coach for a number of years. I have another one who's equally as good now. But that woman taught me about my own style and how that meshed with other people's styles. And I say this, I know you asked the question specific to gender, but I think this is something important for women. Men can approach problems differently. They negotiate differently. They socialize differently. And so being aware of our own styles in each of those facets and understanding that sometimes we do have to adjust our style when we're encountering somebody, either it's of a different gender or of a different cultural background. I think it's about being aware of how we come across and knowing that at times maybe we have to be a little more forceful than we are naturally because that's what's being mirrored back to us. So I don't so much talk about it in terms of gender anymore as I do in terms of diversity of the people generally that you end up working with, which includes males, right? So I think that for me, I know I needed to be more declarative in the way that I stated things. Take out the question mark at the end of the sentence. Just say it. And that's something that a lot of women I notice, especially younger women, kind of struggle with.
Yeah, I mean that might be, one of your quotations, a famous quotation by Caroline. Remove the question marks and put a period to whatever you say. That's so important, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that's amazing.
And
That's great.
similarly, no, no is a complete sentence, right? Sometimes the answer is just no. That's no, that job is not for me, or no, that's not something that we're going to do. And women tend to over explain. So keep that in mind, I always like to say.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think saying no is an art. You need to learn how to say no at times. I mean, I'm a very, by the way, I'm a very bad person. I mean, I'm very amicable. That's the reason I just cannot tell people no at times on the face that no, I cannot do this. But now I'm trying to learn more of no, this is not something which I want to do and which I can do. This is
Yeah.
so important. Absolutely. And that's a life lesson that even I should have from you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, don't always follow my own advice. I've got 10 house guests coming tomorrow. So, you know, it's the 80/20 rule. Most of the time I'm able to be declarative.
That's what law of nature is, and that's absolutely fine. Cool. Uh, let's move to the next section of the interview. We're talking of the show where we talk about more finer things about the movement, about what is the future looking like, right? So
Hmm.
what is the current state of the credit union movement right now? Obviously, multiple changes have happened across the hill. A lot of regulations changing, a lot of appeals that we are doing right now. But where is the movement right now, and how do you think the movement is progressing for this year?
Well, the number one thing that we're talking about right now is the threat of removing our federal income tax exemption.
Yep.
And that's when I talk about threats. There are a lot of people who think, oh, come on, we've been talking about that for years and it's never really happened. But we see a very different environment. This administration is very different. I think we could get surprised in some really unpleasant ways. And we have gotten some signals that that tax exemption is at risk. And so the reason I bring that up is even if we are able to tell our story well and talk about why we as not-for-profit financial cooperatives have earned every right to retain that tax exemption. Let's say that we're successful, and I'm confident that we will be. But even if we're successful with that, there are so many other challenges right behind that. I mean, we've gotten some recent better news about things like the Community Development Financial Institution funding, right? That got threatened for a while, and a lot of credit unions are using that grant money to do wonderful things in their communities. And so, for a period of time, we thought, oh my goodness, that money's going to go away. We recently got a reprieve on the overdraft protection rule. We think that President Trump is going to be signing, a congressional resolution amendment to overturn a CFPB rule that would have capped overdraft protection at $5, which doesn't begin to cover the cost of maintaining an overdraft protection program. So there are these threats to our income statements, and they're real. They're moving and changing by the day, and in a very dynamic environment. I think that's the most politically correct way I could describe what's happening in Washington right now, is that it's dynamic, right? Um, in a dynamic environment, I think that we have to be really vigilant to be sure that the operating income and the net income that credit unions currently have is not further eroded.
I hear you. Yeah, I mean that's a task that all of us are thinking about, and you from an advocacy perspective, that it's become a full-time job for you guys, because that's where you're protecting interest of credit unions and protecting interest of the movement. So I absolutely understand. I don't know if the next question is partly covered over here, is what I understand, but still I want to ask you one specific pointed question. talking about challenges, right? Trade unions are facing multiple challenges. I mean, even if not talking about maybe compliance, talking about the administration, but still multiple challenges that we're trying to overcome. So, what do you think, in your opinion, are the top three challenges that credit unions are facing right now, and what are we doing to address them?
Well, really, you're right. This question does relate back to the last one,
Yeah.
because when I talk about some of these seemingly innocuous initially bills or rules from CFPB, we recognize that it's not just a monetary impact, but there are also oftentimes of operational impacts that, as I mentioned earlier, mean that credit unions have to staff up just to comply. I mean, we would love it if we had complete reform of the CFPB, for example, so that they, for example, had to use a typical review process before they actually wrote a rule. It seems like that should be constitutionally or at least required in statute, that they follow an organized process and don't just tweet or put out on X something that they're suddenly going to start enforcing. So that is a huge challenge. Regulatory burden just generally is a huge challenge for credit unions. The income piece I've mentioned, but I also think that competitive threats are coming from unusual places. We saw the rise of providers like Chime, uh, in during the pandemic when people didn't want to go into a branch and they're doing all this online banking, and consumers are expecting a tremendous amount of access to financial services, and they want that access to be 24/7. They want to have live chat, or at least a really good chat bot. And so credit unions are needing to adopt technology like AI in order to seem relevant, to be relevant, not just to seem relevant, um,
Mm.
to an ever more demanding consumer. So all of that's hard to do. Those are counterbalanced, right? Because you've got less income coming in sometimes, because we get challenges to that with something like an overdraft protection rule, for example. And then on the other side, we do still need to invest in technology. So it's an incredible balancing act. So what we do at Cornerstone for sure is, first we try to ward off the threats that we see coming, and we try to get proactive legislation passed that makes it easier for folks to do business. We recently, for example, made it possible for credit unions in the state of Oklahoma to get a low income designation, which opens up all kinds of avenues for them. So we defend, we go on the offense legislatively, but then, on the for-profit side, we also, Cornerstone, as well as a lot of other league service corporations across the country, offer solutions. We do offer technology
It's
to help credit unions stay relevant.
No, I think what you covered, these are actual challenges, and if I ask, if I add my own 2 cents, I'm like, what, I'm 31, 32. I want an experience that is seamless, right? I mean, I myself am a customer of Chime. I mean, I'll be very honest, right? I want that Chime experience. I want to go to a credit union to be able to open a checking account within 3 minutes. I want that. Otherwise, I mean, I was just reading a number. I mean, when you're trying to apply for a loan, if the the flow doesn't happen within 5 to 7 minutes, the probability of abandonment of a loan increases 3x. And that's real, right? Do we have that time and patience to do it? No. I mean, why do I use my financial institution? Do I use my financial institution to support a movement? Yes, no, I don't know. But for every real sense, being a consumer, I use a financial institution for moving money, for money movement. If that cannot be done easily, why are we even serving that, right? And that's a real challenge to solve. And you know I'm very confident that credit unions are embracing technology and finally thinking of members as consumers, right? They are, at the end of the day, consumer. And look at the consumer economy, right? Look at the consumer psyche to understand what a consumer needs, and changing and rerouting your path according to that, right? So I think that's happening. And It'll take time. It won't happen in a day's time, but eventually we will be there, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we know that certain demographics, I mean, really millennials more than any other demographic are attracted to purpose-driven organizations. And so we do experience some of that halo effect just by the nature of being not-for-profit financial cooperatives. But boy, if that user experience isn't good, they won't stay. And, I find myself, I'm certainly not a millennial. I find myself saying, like, why is this taking so long? I don't have all minute, right? It's like our expectations are high as consumers.
I mean, that's real, right? I mean, I am a Gen Z. I'm almost a Gen Z. I'm like, I call myself Zillennial. I'm like, in that verge of Gen Z and just starting millennials. I wake up. I wake up to the day, not looking at my emails. By the way, I mean, I don't do that. I wake up to the day looking at Instagram reels, looking at TikTok, how things have changed from yesterday to today. Then look at then LinkedIn, and then emails. Versus maybe other people who are in ecosystem for the last 25 years, the first thing they do is look at the email, right? I think that's the change that has happened, and what we need is experience. We need bite-sized content. We need easier online experience. If you're not
Yeah,
giving us that, we are not there for sure. At least I'm not there, right? So that
sure.
is so important, right?
Very true.
Cool. In the interest of time, Caroline, I want to just ask one question, because the way how you'll answer is very different than how a credit union exec answers. I mean, I'm being honest because you are seeing the broader perspective across multiple states, across 650 credit unions. How do you think 2025 is looking like or will look like going forward, considering the macro economic changes that are happening across the ecosystem?
Wow. Well, I think some of us are breathing a bit of a sigh of relief because the stock market has rallied a little bit. I think that really more specific to banking, um, we are looking at a very volatile. I said dynamic earlier. I'm going to upgrade that to volatile environment regulatorily because we are seeing challenges, and some of them are really welcome challenges to rules and to even just kind of outlooks for regulatory agencies. That's welcome. However, we need to land in a place of equilibrium, and that's not certain right now. And so I think one of the things that we're all going to need to do is to be really mindful as we see more government efficiency, for example, measures being played out. What does that mean for us? Worst case scenario, it could mean that we lose our independent regulator. I don't think that's a favorable outcome, even though it might be more efficient for our government. And so as we're looking at sustaining the 2017 or renewing the 2017 tax cuts, and the government is looking right now for $4 trillion in spending. We have to be watching and making our voices heard because there are some of those efficiencies that could actually hurt us. And so I think that, like I said, equilibrium is what's important. I mean, we are a regulated industry, and so how do we land on the other side of all of this transition in a healthy place with common sense regulation and common sense regulators? So I think that's one of my biggest things that's keeping me up at night in 2025, and something that we all should keep our eyes on.
I think that's a new term that I heard today. Common sense regulations, right? We need to socialize this term more. What is common sense regulation? So that's interesting. Again, Caroline, thank you for taking a time out today with us. We really appreciate this 45 minutes that you spent with us and shared your journey, your opinion, and how the movement is looking forward to. We look forward to chatting with you again soon. And again, thank you.
It was so much fun, and I look forward to maybe doing it again sometime. But you did a great job. Appreciate you.
Thank you.